Welcome to the Comedy Reset Spotlight. This is the place to be if you want to hear from some of the most innovative and exciting comedy creators from around the globe. On this podcast, you'll hear from a variety of guests who are pushing the boundaries of what comedy can be. If you're looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas, this is the podcast for you.
Episode 36. New Jersey comedian, Emma Kiernan.
Can you walk us through the moment or series of events that made you realize you wanted to pursue stand-up comedy?
Hey, so I guess the moment that I realized I wanted to pursue stand-up was back in probably 2013. All of a sudden, a bunch of people that I knew kept telling me that I should try it, and it was something that I had never even considered. I've always had terrible social anxiety, and I failed public speaking in college 3 times. So the thought of getting on a stage alone and kind of trying to make people laugh cold was absolutely terrifying. So I went to a few open mics and watched and decided that, you know what, I was going to challenge myself to this because it was something that I knew was going to be extremely difficult. And so if I was able to achieve that, then what else could I achieve?
Who were your comedic inspirations growing up, and how have they influenced your style or approach to comedy?
Growing up, I guess I was first introduced stand-up wise to comics like Paula Poundstone. I loved Dana Carvey. I loved his musical style. As I got a little older, Maria Bamford became probably my number one and still my number one inspiration just due to her completely offbeat, wacky, persona that is so unique. And I would say out of anyone, she's the one that I can relate to the most as far as my style is concerned. It's a little bit out there, a little bit wacky, but it all makes sense in the end. I always appreciated her openness with her struggles with mental health and such, which is also was also very influencing when I was younger. I'm also very into Anthony Jeselnik and some other alt comics such as that.
Describe the very first time you stepped onto a stage to perform stand-up. What was going through your mind, and how did that experience shape your subsequent performances?
My first experience getting on stage was hard. I went to an open mic at a bar that was pretty dead as far as open mics go. I had some friends with me to root me on. I was pumped up. I was ready to go. I got on that stage and I did not have one joke prepared, and I did not know what the hell I was going to say, and I had not thought about any of that beforehand, and I just thought I could wing it, and I could not. And when I got off stage, I kind of said, well, at least I got up there. And after that, it was about probably almost a year before I said to myself, well, I got up there, so why can't I just make it right? And I spent time kind of molding my presence and my persona, and here we are today.
Comedy is an evolving art form. How have you seen your own comedic style change and mature over the years?
I haven't had to change my comedic style all that much, considering it's a little more unique than, I guess, more mainstream approaches. The only thing that I have had to be careful with now is all the cancel culture, which is I can't handle. But I have been a little bit more careful as far as the way I've worded things or the way I approach things. And if needed, and there's a joke that I have that could be considered too much, then I will try to work around it so that it becomes a joke that is just so much that it's not too much anymore.
Can you share a particularly challenging gig or phase in your early career? And what lessons did you take away from it?
I guess the most challenging phase in my career early on was that it's kind of distance in a sense, whereas I'm from North Jersey. I'm about 20 minutes outside of New York City. That's where pretty much everything goes on. So for me to constantly get into the city was difficult, which in turn was making it hard for me to network with producers and other comedians in the city. So there was a very long time that I really wasn't able to make a name for myself at all until I started branching out to other areas, and from the other areas was then able to move into the areas that were closer to me. As far as actual challenging gigs, uh, I mean, early on in their career, I guess every gig is challenging. But I suppose the the most challenging was probably the first actual pro gig that I got, that I was, like a feature on, and I got up there, and the mic wire fell out of the mic, and I was just a deer in headlights, and uh, yeah, so that was pretty embarrassing.
How do you handle the inevitable bombing on stage? And what strategies do you employ to bounce back?
Bombing is always a rough one. Usually you can kind of read the room before you go up and know what kind of reception you'll most likely get. Once I can see that the audience is just not in, or just isn't into me, I do keep a few jokes that are uh, fairly general, that are always jokes that kind of land. And so if things get a little bit too quiet, then I'll throw out one of those jokes to at least kind of get the momentum going. Try a little bit of crowd work, see how that goes. If they're not feeling that, then just keep on going, and you learn from it and you move on.
Walk us through your process of creating a new joke or bit. Do you start with a premise, a punchline, or something else entirely?
My joke writing process is very sporadic. A lot of things will come randomly when I'm driving, and I'll have my fiance grab my phone and put it into my notes, just a random concept. There are other times where it'll be a story that has happened, and so I will shape it so that it can work out to be funny, and then find a punchline in the middle. um, so usually I start with a premise. After I get the premise set up, I have a vague punchline in mind, and then I will work the premise around that punchline if needed.
How do you decide which topics are off limits for you, if any? And how do you navigate sensitive subjects in your comedy?
I generally don't believe any topics are off limits. I do believe that they need to be approached in the correct way. There's there's lazy ways of being edgy, if you will, or dark, and there's ways that you can work around it so that it is somewhat. If it's gonna offend someone, then it's gotta offend everyone. Or if it's gonna offend someone, it's gotta be offensive in a way that you can kind of turn it around and say, but it's true. Um, People are very sensitive now. There are a lot of incidents happening in clubs where audience members are getting extremely angry and physical. That is always a concern, but I try to do my best so that I avoid politics. as best I can. And if I do approach that subject, it's in a very neutral view.
Share with us one of the most memorable moments you've had on stage, whether it was a surprising audience reaction, an unexpected event, or a personal breakthrough.
Some memorable moments on stage. I've had definitely some weird moments. I've had a audience member come up to me after a show. I do a joke that involves being cremated, and I found out that she carries her father's ashes around everywhere she goes. And she thanked me for the joke, and I'm not sure why. Uh, as far as unexpected, like personal breakthroughs, I got runner up in the 2022 Jersey's Funniest Female competition. I did not expect that. That was super cool. I have done a few competitions since. Have placed in each one. Uh, as far as audience reactions while on stage, you just get the typical drunks. But I do like to have fun with them now and then. So I haven't had anything too unexpected. I have had someone steal a joke recently, so that was a fun and it's still fun ongoing little drama. But other than that, yeah, pretty boring.
Have you ever had an interaction with a fan or audience member that deeply impacted you or changed the way you approach comedy?
As far as interactions with audience members or fans go, I haven't had anything I guess that would have deeply impacted me. I have had people come up to me and say, that my style is different. It's a little weird. It's a little quirky, but in a good way. And so, in that kind of a thing, I guess in that sense, I try to keep up with that persona and keep that going, since I know that is what is working for me. If anyone had come up to me and said anything different, then obviously I would reapproach that. But for now, it seems that people are interested in what I'm doing, and I'm here for it.
How do you feel about the current trends in stand up comedy, especially with the rise of online platforms and social media influencing the comedic landscape?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about the current trends, especially with TikTok and Instagram. I'm not a fan of putting a reel up of, say, one joke or a little bit of crowd work. I was never a fan of doing that. I think it's kind of lazy. Um, but at this point, it seems kind of inevitable that it's going to have to be done. Now, since I've had a joke stolen from me, which is exactly why I never put stuff on online. But I now put that joke up so that it is kind of as almost as a timestamp proof of what it is. But I'm not a big fan of posting stuff like that on social medias. As far as Zoom shows and online platforms for open mics and such, I hated them at first during the pandemic. I tried it, I couldn't stand it. But I tried it again a little later on, and it's not too bad. And I use them as open mics to throw out new material and just see what hits and not. And makes it a little bit easier once I'm on stage to throw that out in front of a live audience.
There's been a lot of discussion about cancel culture and comedy. What's your perspective on the balance between pushing boundaries and being respectful?
I think I actually already touched on this. I, I don't like cancel culture. I really don't think anything's off limits in comedy. If you're coming to a comedy show and you know that you're triggered by certain things, then I feel like that's a you problem. I do believe that there is lazy writing where you're just punching down on someone, in which case that's, I wouldn't say off limits, but I would say it makes you look like a very lazy comic. I think there are ways to turn anything into a joke that everyone can agree with in a sense. I don't know if that makes much sense, but there are ways to shape a joke so that there are no opinions involved, and it's just a blanket straight statement that can generally be funny to either side of the argument.
How do you see the future of stand up comedy evolving, especially in a post pandemic world where virtual shows have become more prominent?
I see the future of stand up being interesting in the sense that there's a lot of internet comics that are now playing or like, doing Radio City Music Hall. And, they've been doing reels on Instagram for 2 years. And then there's the rest of us out here that have been doing it for, 10 plus years. The virtual shows, I feel like, will eventually fade. I think it's a good way for things like podcasts or even, just little open mics here and there. But I think predominantly it's going to go back to live shows.
If you had to describe your comedic style in 3 words, what would they be and why?
I guess the 3 words to describe my my comedic style would be dark, awkward, and I guess deadpan, but just random and weird. I guess I touch on stuff that isn't necessarily your everyday observations, as some comedians do. I don't do a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of observational things that generally are not observed all that often.
Who are some current comedians you admire or believe are pushing the boundaries of the art form?
I really like Anthony Jeselnik. He's a good example of how you can take a subject that is very much off limits and make it so that it is just so blanketly offensive that you can't really get mad about it. Um, I I admire the fact that he's willing to go out there and try that. Um, I do like a lot of John Mulaney's work. I think his writing in general is always brilliant. And he has that awkward flair as well. There's a lot of new comedians coming out now that are really talented, and there's a lot of styles starting to unfold, and it's interesting to see.
Comedy often serves as a reflection of society. How do you incorporate your personal experiences and observations about the world into your sets?
I'm a little bit all over the place. A lot of my jokes don't necessarily come from actual experiences, or even observations, especially about current day events. I will sometimes put things into the joke that will refer or insinuate things about society or the current culture of things. But generally speaking, I I'm not that serious.
For aspiring comedians listening to this podcast, what piece of advice would you give them that you wish someone had given you when you were starting out?
I think the advice that I would give someone would be you're going to have to be in this for a while. It's not going to come easy. No matter how good your jokes are, it doesn't matter unless people hear them. And so, network, network, network. Get as much stage time as you can. All stage time is good, even if it's just in front of a bartender, because at least you can sound it out and you can sound out your material and use it as much as you possibly can. Write every day. Never put something down and say, no, that's not a good joke. Always keep it in there. I think everything can be a good joke if you shape it enough. But yeah, it's gonna be a long road, and you're gonna have to work for it, and you're gonna have to really love it.
Finally, what's next for you in your comedic journey? And where can our listeners catch your next performance?
As far as my comedic journey goes, I guess it's just as everyone else. Start touring more. Always looking for more stage time. Always looking um, for new comics to network with, new producers to network with. I have a little bit of a hiatus right now. I'm getting some health stuff done, but October 20th, you can catch me at the Hudson Mills Tavern and Catering at Garnerville, New York, for a Parents' Night Out comedy show. So that'd be fun, I guess. Thank you.
I've been your host, Rob Chaffee. Don't forget to laugh today. It's good for you. Comedy Reset Spotlight is a podcast that brings you today's freshest and funniest comedy creators. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to hear more.